played a couple of games of chess. I was playing with the other two, you know. It happened to begin with as I expected. We heard suddenly a sound of a gunshot, and it dropped somewhere in the village, deep in the village. So we immediately jumped up, grabbed our blanket, grabbed our chessboard, and started running to the farmhouse, to the door. But just as we approached the door, the next shell dropped within 10 feet of where we were standing, and I was wounded by shrapnel in my thigh, in my leg. I started bleeding, I kind of fainted. The other two fellows dragged me down to the basement, put me on the mattress somewhere. My electrical engineering colleague, he went out while fighting was still going on, went out looking for a doctor. He found there was only one German village doctor in the village, or in the town. He found him, he brought him to our farmhouse. The doctor gave me morphine to kind of, because I was in pain. He dressed the wound the best he could temporarily, and he left because there were other wounded around he had to attend. And I stayed there for another 2-3 days while the fighting was going on. It was about a 3-day fight. It was a tough fight. After 3 days, the American army took over the town, and after the fighting ended, I was taken to a little German hospital right in town. It was a tiny little place, but there were several other civilians wounded, some of them badly, shattered legs and arms and whatnot. I was fortunate. As it turned out, I had a flesh wound in the thigh. Bone was not damaged at all. My village doctor took good care of me. And after about 2 months in the hospital, I could get out on crutches and started walking, and a few weeks later I actually was back to normal. Now, by the time I got out of the hospital, it was end of June, and by that time the war was over, of course. If you turn to map 6 now, the Hof, the little town where we were, became part of the US zone. The location for my sister, I knew, used to live in Göttingen, near Göttingen, was in British zone. My father, I knew he was in Posen, but of course Posen by now was occupied by the Soviet army. I didn't know what happened to my father. And after a few weeks, after I kind of became able to move around freely, as my leg got back to normal pretty much, I traveled from Hof. That would be like end of June, I guess, June 45. And of course there was no real passenger train service. And so I traveled by catching freight trains from one town to the next, kind of like a hobo. But over 2 or 3 days I managed to get from Hof to Vassell, which is near Göttingen there, but in the American zone. And then from there I got into Hanmünden, which is a little town south of Göttingen where my sister was. And I discovered that my sister was safe and sound, still in Göttingen. The apartment was not damaged, the house was not damaged. And in fact, my father managed to leave Posen before the Soviet army arrived and managed to get to Göttingen too. So my father and his wife and little son were in Posen, in Göttingen also, in the little town. Well, I stayed with my sister for a few days. And then I registered at the displaced persons camp in that little town. There was a big refugee camp in the town. Of course, there were a lot of millions of refugees kind of because of the war conditions all over. And there was a big camp of about 3,000 displaced persons right in that town. And I registered there. And in a few days, it became obvious that I became very valuable person because I was the only one who spoke any English. The population in the camp were all Polish, mostly peasants. They, and then there were a few Latvians and Estonians, but nobody spoke English. And my English was not very good at all, but good enough for the purposes. And British Red Cross that was running that camp kind of embraced me right away as a big help for them. And I started working with them and became a kind of a part of the administration of that camp. After a few months, British Red Cross passed to the administration of the camps that they were running to United Nations, to the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, UNRWA, which was running most of the refugee camps at that point throughout the western zones. And when British Red Cross left, they recommended me to the UNRWA. So UNRWA actually offered me a position as an officer of UNRWA, and I became an official officer of UNRWA in administering a number of camps in that area of Göttingen within radius of maybe 30 or 40 miles in that area. And I was doing it for a couple of years, I guess, until UNRWA was terminated, disbanded in June 47. By that time, most of the resettlement of those millions and millions of refugees was completed. The only refugees that were still there were political refugees who were refusing to go back to the countries where they came from because of the Soviet occupation. So it was a different kind of a situation. So United Nations created a new organization, more limited organization called International Refugee Organization, IRO, and UNRWA was disbanded, and I, being officer of UNRWA, became unemployed at that point. So I was in Göttingen area, and now in June 47 I became unemployed. Well, I felt that was a good time for me to get back to finishing my education. I got my undergraduate degree in Berlin, and I wanted to get my graduate degree also in Berlin. But as you all know, Berlin was occupied by the Four Powers, was run by the Four-Power Commission, and to get there you had to go across the Soviet zone, and I, as a displaced person, there was no official way for me to get from British zone into the Soviet zone and into Berlin. So what I did, I crossed the border again. I kind of got to the habit of crossing borders. I crossed the border again from the British zone into the Soviet zone on foot.